The forest was quiet in the kind of way that made fear louder than sound, a suffocating silence broken only by the distant creak of branches swaying like witnesses that refused to speak. The moon hung low and pale above the trees, its light struggling to pierce the thick canopy as if even it didn't want to see what was happening below. The woman's wrists burned where the plastic cuffs bit into her skin, every movement sending sharp pain up her arms. Dirt smeared her face, mixed with tears she had stopped trying to wipe away. She had begged already. She had screamed until her throat was raw. None of it mattered. The men dragging her deeper into the woods wore badges that glinted faintly when the moonlight caught them, badges that were supposed to mean safety, justice, protection. Tonight, they meant death. She had learned their names earlier that evening, during what was supposed to be a routine traffic stop. Officer Daniels with his fake smile. Officer Briggs with his dead eyes. Sergeant Cole, the leader, calm and methodical, the kind of man who spoke softly while deciding how you were going to die. They had found the files in her car, documents she shouldn't have had, evidence copied late at night from a city database she had access to as a low-level clerk. She hadn't even known how deep the corruption went until she saw the money trails, the falsified reports, the disappearances labeled as accidents. She thought she could drop the files anonymously. She thought wrong. Now Daniels laughed as he shoved her forward, nearly sending her face first into the dirt. You should have stayed quiet, he said, as if offering friendly advice. People who stay quiet live longer. She didn't even last a week, Briggs muttered, gripping her arm harder. That's got to be a record. Sergeant Cole raised a hand, and they stopped near a shallow pit already dug into the earth. The smell of freshly turned soil filled the air. Her heart dropped so hard she thought she might pass out. This wasn't a threat. This wasn't intimidation. This was the end. Please, she whispered, the word barely audible. Someone knows. People will ask questions. Cole crouched in front of her, his face calm, almost kind. They always do, he said. And then they stop. He nodded toward the pit. Daniels grabbed a shovel. The sound of metal scraping dirt echoed through the trees like a countdown. What none of them noticed, what none of them even considered, was that they were not alone. High on a ridge overlooking the clearing, partially concealed by fallen logs and dense brush, a man lay perfectly still. His breathing was slow, controlled, almost non-existent. Beside him sat a large Belgian Malinois, muscles coiled, eyes locked on the scene below with an intelligence that went far beyond training. The dog's ears twitched, picking up every sound, the shovel, the boots, the woman's broken breathing. The man's jaw tightened. His name was Luke Mercer. Officially, he was a civilian now. Unofficially, the habits of a Navy SEAL never leave you. Luke had come to these woods for quiet, for space, for the kind of solitude that kept the ghosts from getting too loud. He lived off-grid a few miles away, training his dog, Ranger, every day not because he had to, but because stopping felt like dying. Luke had noticed the unmarked police SUV earlier, moving too slowly down a road that almost no one used. His instincts had flared immediately. Bad instincts were the ones you learned to listen to. He followed at a distance, silent as shadow, Ranger padding beside him without a sound. When the SUV stopped and the woman was dragged out, Luke had already known something was wrong. When the shovels came out, he knew something worse. Ranger let out a low, barely audible growl. I know, Luke whispered, his eyes never leaving the scene. His mind ran through options with terrifying speed. 3 men, armed, trained, but sloppy, confident, overconfident. The woman was alive. That mattered. Below, Sergeant Cole straightened up. Do it, he said. Daniels grabbed the woman by the shoulders and shoved her toward the pit. She stumbled, screaming now, pure terror ripping out of her chest as she clawed at the dirt, her nails breaking as she tried to hold onto the world. Briggs raised the shovel. That was when Ranger moved. The dog shot forward like a missile, a blur of muscle and teeth exploding out of the darkness. His bark tore through the night, loud and furious, a sound that froze blood. Daniels barely had time to turn before Ranger hit him full force, slamming him to the ground. The scream that followed was short and high, cut off as Ranger locked onto his arm with crushing precision. What the? Briggs shouted, spinning around just as Luke rose from the shadows, moving fast, silent, lethal. Luke's first strike was a disarming blow to Briggs' wrist. The gun hit the dirt before Briggs even realized it was gone. Luke followed with a knee to the ribs that knocked the air clean out of him. Sergeant Cole reached for his weapon, but Luke was already there. "Don't," Luke said quietly. Cole hesitated. That hesitation cost him everything. Luke drove him backward with controlled violence, years of combat flowing through every movement. Cole went down hard, his gun skidding across the forest floor. Ranger released Daniels only long enough to reposition, standing over him with teeth bared, daring him to move. The woman collapsed to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, her body shaking so violently it looked like it might tear itself apart. Luke was at her side instantly, cutting the cuffs with a blade that seemed to appear from nowhere. "You're safe," he said, his voice steady, grounding. "You're safe now." She looked at him like she couldn't believe he was real. Police sirens wailed in the distance, but these were different. Real. Clean. Luke had already triggered the call the moment he saw the pit. As the corrupt officers lay restrained on the forest floor, Ranger standing guard like a silent judge, Luke wrapped his jacket around the woman's shoulders. The forest seemed to breathe again. And somewhere deep inside the darkness, justice finally woke up. Dawn crept into the forest slowly, pale light spilling through the trees as if the world itself was cautious about what it was revealing. The night's violence still clung to the air. Muddy boot prints scarred the ground. The half-dug grave yawned open like a secret that had almost been kept forever. Red and blue lights flashed between the trunks, painting the woods in harsh, accusing colors. Real police officers moved carefully through the scene, their faces tight with disbelief as they took in the sight. 3 fellow cops zip-tied on the forest floor, weapons confiscated, a terrified woman wrapped in a stranger's jacket, and a large military dog sitting perfectly still beside them, eyes sharp, unblinking. Luke Mercer stood slightly apart, hands visible, posture calm. He had already told them everything, names, actions, the exact moment he'd intervened. Years of discipline kept his voice even, but inside, old memories stirred. Too many nights like this. Too many moments when someone survived only because someone else refused to look away. The woman, her name was Emily Carter, sat on the back bumper of an ambulance. A medic checked her vitals, gently speaking to her as if reminding her that kindness still existed. Emily nodded, but her eyes kept drifting back to the pit. Every time she looked at it, her breath hitched. That hole wasn't just dirt. It was what her life was supposed to become. Forgotten, covered, erased. Luke noticed. He always noticed. He walked over slowly and crouched in front of her so he was at eye level. Ranger followed, sitting beside him like a living wall. "They won't touch you again," Luke said quietly. Emily swallowed. They said no one would believe me. That they'd make it look like I ran. Or overdosed. Or attacked them." Luke's jaw tightened. They underestimated 2 things. She looked at him. "What?" "The truth," he said. "And how loud it gets when the right people hear it." Nearby, one of the honest officers, Captain Reyes, finished taking photos of the pit. His face was grim. "We already ran their names," he said to Luke. "Internal Affairs is on their way. Federal too." Emily stiffened. "Federal. Yes," Reyes said gently. "Because what you uncovered doesn't stop with them." That was when the weight of it all finally crashed down on her. Emily had known the files were bad, but she hadn't known how deep. The evidence she'd copied wasn't just about bribes or falsified arrests. It showed a network, seized assets disappearing, civilians vanishing after traffic stops, witnesses silenced. These men weren't rogue. They were part of something rotten at the core. "They'll come after me," Emily whispered. "If not today, then later." Luke didn't hesitate. "Not while I'm breathing." Those words weren't dramatic. They were a promise. By mid-morning, the corrupt officers were loaded into separate vehicles, their faces pale, their confidence gone. Daniels wouldn't stop shaking. Briggs refused to look at anyone. Sergeant Cole stared straight ahead, his calm finally cracked, eyes hollow as if he were already imagining prison walls closing in. As they drove away, Emily let out a breath she felt she'd been holding her entire life. But survival was only the beginning. The days that followed were brutal. News broke fast, whistleblower nearly buried alive by corrupt police officers. The story exploded across media outlets. Public outrage erupted. Protests formed. Officials made statements. Some were genuine. Many were lies wrapped in concern. Emily was moved to a safe location. Guards at every door. Phones monitored. Every knock made her flinch. Sleep came in fragments, nightmares dragging her back to the forest, the shovel, the dirt hitting her legs. Luke stayed close. He didn't crowd her. He understood trauma too well for that. He trained Ranger every morning, the rhythmic movements grounding them both. Sometimes Emily watched from the porch, wrapped in a blanket, finding strange comfort in the discipline, the order. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Emily finally spoke the words she'd been carrying. "Why were you there?" she asked. Luke paused, then answered honestly. "Because I don't sleep well around people. And because the woods don't lie." She nodded slowly. "If you hadn't been," Luke finished for her, "you'd be gone." Silence stretched between them, not awkward, but heavy with truth. The trial came faster than anyone expected. The evidence was overwhelming. Body cam footage mysteriously missing. Financial records exposed. Testimonies from people who had been too afraid to speak, until Emily survived. One survival had cracked the dam. Sergeant Cole took a plea deal. Briggs tried to fight it. Daniels cried on the stand. None of it mattered. Guilty. On all counts. When the verdict was read, Emily didn't cry. She simply closed her eyes and breathed. For the first time in weeks, the air didn't feel poisoned. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones thrust forward. "What made you come forward?" one asked. Emily looked at Luke, standing a few steps behind her with Ranger at his side. "Because silence kills," she said. "And because sometimes, angels don't have wings. Sometimes they have scars." Luke looked away. He never liked being called a hero. Months later, the forest looked different. The pit was gone, filled in, grass growing over it like a quiet apology. Emily stood at the edge of the clearing one last time. She wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't weak. She was still healing, but she was alive. Luke waited by the truck. "I'm leaving," Emily said. "New city. New start." He nodded. "Good." She hesitated, then hugged him. It was brief, but real. "Thank you," she whispered, "for choosing not to look away." Luke watched her drive off, Ranger sitting beside him, tail wagging once. The world hadn't become perfect. Corruption still existed. Darkness still hid in places people didn't want to see. But one night in the woods proved something important. Evil only wins when good people stay silent. And sometimes, justice comes on four legs and sharp instincts. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of courage, truth, and unexpected heroes. Because the next life saved might only need one person willing to stand up and watch.